Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
You know, I just realized I accidentally grabbed my Achieve Results Now coffee mug
Nice.
for recording today. So what a happy coincidence.
Yes, I wish I had mine with me.
I know. And
I'm sorry I don't.
as the coffee's flowing, today we're talking about going with the flow. We're
Yes, we
talking
are.
about how to better go with the flow, even when, and I love this, even when it's a flood.
Yeah.
Because I think about the days and I think about the weeks and I think about how we all have a plan and we all have actions we want to take and dreams that we want to chase and goals that we want to do. And then sometimes, just sometimes, the stuff doesn't go the way we want.
Yep. Yep.
And
For
I
sure.
think it happens so often that it's worth talking about and giving people some good tools.
It's definitely a balance also. We did a podcast that I'll link to it in the show notes, rigid flexibility. I think
Hmm.
that summarizes what is a good mindset to have, because it's important that you plan out things. You don't have to plan every day of your life, but I think certainly throughout the week, throughout your work week, I think it's important that you're planning out so you're at least going in the direction that you want to go
Yeah.
versus being haphazard. But also you have to have flexibility in there. So when you're planning out, you want to make sure also when things come up, if you own a business, you definitely have a lot of this. If
Yeah.
you have kids, you definitely have a lot of this. That things are unpredictable. Things happen. Kids get sick. There's a bunch of things that could happen. I was just
Hmm.
talking about my day today with you, of all the things I had to make changes in to make some things happen. That none of it was my fault of what I have to change, but I
Yeah.
still have to change it.
Uh-huh.
So you were mentioning that my attitude about it was like, okay, so I have to change it versus what other people would do, and that like struck me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it
No, for
was.
sure, because you had a lot of monkey wrenches hit your day today, and you were telling me about it, and it all veered towards a positive outcome
Yeah,
in all areas where
yeah,
if somebody else had been telling the story, it would have been blaming this person and blaming that person and what a jerk this person is, and and I think being able to develop that mindset is important. And I always go back to that. When I think about things like this, I always go back to the quote. You probably remember who said it better than I did, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
yeah. Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson, right? And I think that it's a good guideline. Like when you're a pilot and you're flying a plane, you're off course so much of the time, but you still have to have that flight plan. Like here's where I'm going, right? And then turbulence is going to set in and things are going to
Hmm.
happen, and you have to adjust to still get there. Now,
Right.
on the other hand, if there are just people who are bad pilots,
Yeah.
and that's a different thing you have to fix, right? If
Right.
you're just constantly going off course and self-sabotaging, and that's a whole nother podcast. But this is
Right.
really focused
That
on
is a whole other
there's a whole
podcast.
nother podcast, but this is
Yeah.
really focused on those things that aren't anything you cause, those curveballs that come in, those, I have a full day at work and now there's a snow day, right? And the
Yeah.
kids are home and
Yeah.
I have to adjust, and I can either look at it as a train wreck of a day or
Right.
I can make it one of the best days I've had yet, right?
Yeah.
Better every day. So today's the best one yet. That's what we're aiming for.
And it really is all about an attitude shift and not
Yeah.
getting upset about things that you don't have control over, right? And then focusing on the things you do have control over. So you wanted to do this one thing and now you can't. Okay. Is there something better? Is there a good reason for it? How often have you heard stories? And I've heard many stories in my life, some real, some probably made up, of people that they were mad initially for missing something, and that turned out that saved their life. You
Yeah.
heard stories. We're old enough with 9/11. You heard people that missed their flight, that this happened, they overslept, and they would have been on that plane that crashed, right?
Hmm.
So you hear those stories, and those are true stories. But you also hear other stories of accidents that could happen, or this happened, or whatever. And excuse me, so often it turns into positive. It turns
Yeah.
into happy times. But if you have the wrong attitude and a bad attitude because things didn't go your way the way you had it in your mind, you're going to miss those opportunities oftentimes, or you're
Yeah.
going to be miserable up until the positively slaps you in the face.
Yeah.
And that's no way to live either,
It's
right?
not.
Being slapped with positivity and
Right.
you begrudgingly say, fine, I guess it was better. Well, you missed all that opportunity to be happy all the way up to that point, just
Yeah.
because you were stubborn and stupid, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's funny. The phrase, we'll laugh about this in 20 years,
Yeah.
so why wait?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
really like it's really so powerful because it's true, right? I mean, in 20 years, when you look back on these problems, hopefully you don't have them anymore. Right. Hopefully you fix the things that are
Yeah.
causing the problems. But when you look back at these minor inconveniences, you're going to look back and say, man, I wish I wasn't so stressed that day because it wasn't
Yeah.
that big a deal and everything worked out. And why bother waiting to be not stressed? Why not just relax now?
Right. Right.
And I think that's a good segue, into the first action step here,
Yep.
which is pause before you react. And
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, I wish I could just instill this in everybody.
Yeah.
The ability to just pause and think for a few minutes
Hmm.
before going off the rails.
Right. Yeah. So so many relationships have been maybe not ruined, but some of them ruined, but at least tainted because people react to something that really was nothing. And they
Yeah.
overreacted. They said the wrong things. They said something to somebody else. They acted inappropriately, whatever. And if they just paused for even 5 seconds, it would have been much better.
Yeah.
That's just lack of self-control. I mean, that's really what it is. And it's sad because you're going through life and you're so reactive.
Yeah.
That's not any way to live. I don't think.
It's not. And I always use the phrase, whatever happens is the best thing that could have happened,
Yeah.
and that's one of my favorite phrases because it forces me to pause for a second and say, what if this happened for me, not
Right.
to me,
Yes.
right? I mean, what if this
Hmm.
snow day happened because I need a break? I
Right.
need to take this time and hang out with my kids a
Right.
little bit,
Yep.
you know, and it completely shifts the way you see it. You did this with one of the things that happened to you today,
Yeah.
where you were talking to me and you said, well, no, because this happened, I get to do this,
Yeah.
and it's like, wow, what a positive way
Yeah.
to reframe it instead of saying, oh, this jerk didn't do this thing or whatever,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
what most people would do.
Right.
Asking yourself, what if this was a benefit? Like, what would that look like is really
Right.
important.
Yeah. And it's just you have to. I think some people are natural with this,
Yeah.
but most people aren't.
No.
And so you can train yourself to this. And yeah, we're all born with a certain personality and a certain bias. But I don't remember who said it. It might have been Darren Hardy or Jim Rohn. Sounds like something he would say. He talks about, and I think this was somebody from the audience. It must have been Jim Rohn. This was long ago. He's like, how can is attitude taught, or are you born with it? And he said it's 50-50. That was
Yeah.
his take on it. And he worked with hundreds of thousands of people. I would trust him more than just anybody. And
Sure.
and I kind of believe that we're born with a certain temperament. We're born with a certain attitude. But then from there, as we're brought up and whatever family we're in, that's going to lean one way or the other and get us to the either over the edge or the other way. And
Yeah.
so things can be taught, things can be learned, and you can
Hmm.
overcome a lot of things, and you can overcome negativity, and you can get yourself when you're an adult out of the situation that you're in as a child, and be positive and be more. And I think oftentimes, like the people that are born with money, those kids usually aren't successful. Not always, but usually
Right.
aren't. The people that aren't born with money but have drive and they then become successful. I mean, how many
Hmm.
of the billionaires really didn't have money when they started?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-made millionaires, but there's also pretty substantial handful of self-made billionaires. I mean, think
Hmm.
of what you have to do, the mindset, and what you have to do to pull yourself out of that, of where you started from.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. That
Uh-huh.
is really a lot.
It's
So
funny. I heard a quote this morning that the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people isn't that they have less problems, it's that they have better solutions.
yeah, that's
Because
great.
because really, like, we all have the same problems, but the people
Yep.
who excel, the people who achieve, the people who are listening to this podcast, obviously, right, are people
Right.
who look for better solutions to those
Yeah.
problems. And that's why you seek out coaches. That's why you seek out people who have solved the problems you're having,
Right.
because they know, they've walked the road, they know the road, where sometimes
Right.
people who are born into less problems, they kind
Yeah.
of struggle later because they don't know how to figure it out. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and when you teach, getting back to when you're teaching kids or teaching whoever, and you give them everything, you make it easy for them,
Yeah.
and you're not hard on them, you're not doing them any favor. I was really hard on my kids, but I was loving, but I was hard.
Yeah.
Like, you have to do this, you have to do that. You don't need to call in sick. You're fine.
Yeah.
Suck it up. That is the mindset to become successful.
Hmm.
And yeah, I have money. You don't have money. When my kids, oh, we can afford that. No, I can afford it, but I don't think you have a job, so you have zero money, so you can't afford it.
Uh-huh.
That hopefully has taught them the value of money, and it's important that they're doing it on their own. They're not using daddy's money, but they're making it on their own.
Yeah. No,
That's
100%.
and so I think all of that, even though we're a little off topic, but it's kind of, I think it's relevant.
No, it definitely is. And I think as we get into our second step, which is, it relates to the first step, right? But it's asking what's still in your control. So
Yeah,
as kind of during that pause or after that, looking at your day and saying, okay, so things are different than what I
yeah,
planned, but what can I still control? Because just because you get thrown off the rails doesn't mean you can't physically steer back in,
right,
turn into the skid a little bit.
right.
So I think this
Yeah,
is a great question, because I think what happens is, we get one flat and then we flatten the other three and we just let our day crash into the wall.
right, right.
Right. So really looking at your day, your life, and saying, what here is still in my control? Where can I have a positive impact and keep this moving in the right direction?
Yeah, if you have a morning that is less than stellar, you had some issues in the morning, why ruin the rest of your day?
Right.
People do that. You,
Yeah.
you hear it quite often with people maybe around you. Oh, I just had a bad morning. So they're going to bring that bad morning to work, and they're going to try to make everybody else have a bad morning. And
Hmm.
then they have a bad afternoon, and they have a bad evening. They can't wait for the day to be over. What a dumb way to live. I mean, really. I mean, you're in so much, you should be in so much control over that. Okay, something bad happened to you. Let it go. There's nothing you can do about it,
Yeah.
unless you need to fix something. Move on and get on to the rest of your day.
Yeah. And so, sometimes it's looking at the end of your day and saying, like, how can I cushion my landing? Like how can I
Yeah,
move things around later,
yeah,
so that I have more time here to fix this?
right.
How can and there's so many things that are in your control that move you back to your goal, right? Maybe I don't have time to do the 30 things that were on my list today, because of this, sidetrack, but maybe I can grab the top five of those and make some progress. Do I have time for that? But I think it's so important to say, what can I control to get this? Exactly what you said. We have to have a plan. We have to be moving in a direction. And when we get knocked off that path, sometimes it's a good thing and we want to
Yeah.
experience it and we want to be here for it.
Hmm.
But we do still have to veer back towards what we want to get accomplished.
Right.
So I think asking what you can still control will help you build that map in that direction.
Yeah, and save the drama for something that's really
Hmm.
worth that drama. You
Yeah.
have a death in the family. There's a bad accident. Somebody is sick. You just heard that somebody close to you has cancer. All of those things are, they're fine. That's fine for you to be upset, and even have an upset for a day or so because of that. But somebody cut you off in traffic, somebody flipped you off, so
Yeah.
your kid was mad at you because they're a teenager. Teenagers are always mad at their parents. I mean, simple little things like that. It's like, why are you letting that ruin your day?
Yeah.
Your kid yelled at you, because How old are they? Oh, well, they're 15. Well, yeah, they're going to yell at you for the next probably three or 4 years. So get used to it.
Hmm.
Don't let that ruin your day. That's the thing that I think people need to really work on is don't be a drama queen or a drama king
Hmm.
with stupid things that are irrelevant.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
I love the 15-year-olds will yell at me for the next 3 years. So
for sure. Yeah, there you go.
happens to me weekly, and you just
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
smile and know they'll love you in 2 hours. It's
yeah,
good.
yeah. They still love you.
They do. And then our last step, which is one of my favorites, is you know actively change a have to a get to.
Yep. Hmm.
And this is so weird because we talk about how our language can impact our life,
Right.
and how our language can impact our mindset.
Yep.
But when we say we have to do something, I have to take out the garbage, I
Right.
have to do the laundry. It's it's a different emotional vibe than
Hmm.
saying I get to do the laundry.
Right.
I
Yep.
get to go to work.
For
I
sure.
get to drive my kids in the morning.
Yep.
And so not only does it have a positive impact on your feelings about the activity, right? Because even if in your head oh, this is just verbal hullabaloo or whatever, right?
Right.
Your brain's gonna say at some point, I have to prove that to myself.
Yeah.
Your subconscious is gonna say, his mouth said get to. Why? And then your subconscious is going to work to find reasons why this is an enjoyable activity,
Right.
why this is your benefit. And I think that is magical.
Yes. Well, I remember we used to drive our kids to school. So early on, my wife didn't work and she drove the kids to school. And then when she went back to work when the kids got older, I don't think I drove my daughter, but I drove my son to school. And I just remember this is great.
Yeah.
This is not something I have to do. This is something I want to do because 10, 15 minutes in the car in the morning, sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't, but just being there, hanging with them, starting our day together. I mean, well, I think back now that I don't have that anymore, and I won't have that.
Yeah.
And and if I had the attitude of, man, either there's so much to do, I gotta run a business, I gotta do this, I gotta work out. This it's kind of interrupting my day. I'm taking them to school, but I already have been up for 2 hours. It's kind of smack in the middle of my production and
Yeah.
productive time. Those are all the things I could think of, and all of those things are true.
Right.
But me reframing it is that I get to do this. I get to spend time with my son. I get to improve our relationship, and I'll get to that all the other stuff, and I'll just readjust. Made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And it's I love that you said that because that's like literally when we were planning this podcast, we were talking about how you don't realize you do this. Like
Yes.
this is something you do naturally and other
Yes.
people don't. Because I mean, how often
Yeah.
do you hear people, oh, I have to take the kids to school and then I have to do that and then I have to go to work and then I have to, and you hear that cadence and you go,
Yeah.
wow, your life sucks. Like your
Yeah.
life is terrible. Like
Yeah.
there's all these things
Yeah.
you have to do that you just sound like you hate, right?
Yeah.
And when people say, geez, Mark, how do you live such a great life? My life's no different than everybody else's. I have
Right.
the same stresses. I have the same work. I mean,
Right.
I would go on a ledge and say I work harder than 80% of the people I know,
Yeah, for sure.
even though it's probably not true. And it's probably just me pumping myself
Yeah.
up. But, but because I say I get to do these things, right? I
Yeah.
get to, go to this board meeting. I get to lead this group. I get to work with my agents. People go, wow, that sounds like it's really interesting and fun. It doesn't sound like work. It
Right.
sounds like things I want to enjoy. So I think this is one of those things where if the brain came with an instruction manual, this would be in there.
Yes, it would. Absolutely would. Yep. Okay, so I think this was good. We really expanded on this. Let's review. So number one, and this is a big one. This is important. This takes practice. This takes a lot of practice for some people more than others, and it's pause before you before you react. You're going to have to do maybe a pattern interrupt. That's a whole other podcast that we could talk about pattern interrupts for some of you to be able to do this. But if once you learn this skill, and I think stoicism, I've studied that a lot, and I think this is a big part of it. It is just pause, take a beat, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, And just think about it before you say anything. You don't have to say anything. Just stand there. That's it. And then think, and then speak. There's
So
your instructions for number one.
so great. Number two, ask what's still in your control. What can you actively do to both, enjoy the process after we've done our pause and react, but also guide us back toward the results that we're trying to achieve. So
Right.
what do we have control over that we can do to cushion our landing, to get the things done, to do what we need to do that day to make it great?
Yep. And then the third one is change have to get to, or I must do to get to. And that shift in the words, in the verbiage, makes all the difference in your mindset.
And if you're listening to this podcast, now you get to go have a great day. You
You
get
get
to
to.
go have a
You
great
get
day.
to.
You get to share this podcast with somebody who would
Yes.
enjoy it. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.